Hello everyone and welcome back. So I just spent most of the afternoon today doing some refactoring. I didn't show the individual steps because refactoring is pretty boring, but it does mean we'll have to go through the changes. So I'm going to use this also as a bit of an overview to see where we're at. One of the things I've done is I've created this new class, which I called FCP in all caps. I did that just to stand for flashcard program, FCP. This class can literally be anything you want to name it, but I moved in the stuff that was part of Form 1 with the statics and things like that. So we've got the file data here with the strings, base path, user file, all of this stuff like before. We've got our lexicon field and line separators in here. But then I also moved in the functions, the methods that we use to load data. And I kept most of the names the same as what they were, so that all you'd have to do is update where it said form1 dot to now say FCP dot whatever. Some of them I did update a little bit of the names on them just for clarity. Other things are going to have items added to it. And these are all returning values now too. So I didn't have to change anything with load data because it was already returning the output. But for example, with save data, I now return that it's true when it's complete and things like that. We can throw in an error message here. Actually, I can even just go ahead and add that here where we return false. So we can add that in here as well. This will just help keep everything organized. And ultimately, I'll be going back and adding some of this try and catch throughout this. But for now, I just wanted to move these in. So let me go over this one in detail, and then I'll go through all of the classes and all of the forms that we have available in this program, just so everybody who is following along is on the same page. So again, these are all the same variables, just moved from form 1 into here. Come down, load data still functions the same. We have the output, and save data is also doing the same thing, where we just write out to the file contents and do that. Then I moved generate ID into here. This is where we get the time in milliseconds, and we use that for our IDs. And I also moved the playing of the audio file into this place as well, because we're going to need that in multiple locations. So I've got this here where you just put in the audio file location, and it goes through it, sets all this stuff up, plays the sound, and will return true if it works, and it will return false if there was a problem with it. So that's the main class now that we're going to be using to keep track of this. But I also went through and updated most of the other classes. Let's start with the user class here. So you can see here that save all users now is in here. I believe this was one that I've changed because it used to be save all usernames, I believe, when we had that. But I've changed it to save all users here. It also returns a Boolean. We can feed in a list of users, and it will save that list to the file. So we move that out of form 1 and into users. This is the class that's been the least updated with that sort of thing. So let's go over and look at the words next. So words now, when we come in, the top part again is the same, but I've moved in these functions such as the loading all words. So it takes in the language ID value and will load all the words that are related to that language. So the file manipulation is all part of this class as well. It's all done straight from here. We can just call in this function, words.loadAllWords, and it will return back the list of words that are associated with that language ID. This code, again, is still the same as what it was before. Save all words is the same concept, but again, we're saving instead of loading it. And it's taking in the language ID value, which will be part of the directory path as well. So all of the same concepts are included, but this is just a different place for it. I moved in the check for duplicates here, so you can submit a list of words with a test word as a string and see if that's in there. We can also do another version of this that will take in a list of words and check for like the user ID, for example, different things like that. But for now, this is what we were using it for, finding a specific word within a list of all words. So this all words is what is submitted. It's not looking up all the words itself. So you tell it what list of words you want to have look through with the test word. And I'll show you when we get to actually looking at the code changes for the individual forms that pop up and control this, how that has changed over there too. Finally, I put the audio directory as part of the words as well, because if you look up in here, audio file is part of this. So it made sense to me that we have the ability to get the audio directory. It just needs the language ID, just like we have the language ID up in this method. So you give it the language ID and it returns back the appropriate location for that directory for every single individual language. Now, this is one of those things that's just a quick one line. We could have kept that in, but this makes it look a little bit better, so I put it in here. Finally, we've got our get selected word where we search for a word name, we go through the list of words. And actually, this is one of those things where maybe for consistency, I might switch it up and put the list first and then the string. In fact, let me just go ahead and do that. So I kind of want to copy this, take that out, put this in, and do it in this order. Now this, because I switched this, will, as you can see, break what was out there. And in case you were wondering if you want to do this yourself, what you can do is check these errors when you do updates. Like how I did the refactoring is I copied and pasted the methods in, made sure that they would work correctly, commented out where they were originally, and looked for where the errors were. So for example, now I can come into here and know that these are just going to be reversed order. So I can copy this, come back over to here, come over to this part, do that. And now this function will work correctly. We come down to this one and we do the same thing. Move that out here. And the only reason I'm doing this is just to keep some level of consistency. So that is all of those errors. Let me go back up to here. In any case, this will now return the selected words. When we send in a word we're looking for, it searches the list and it returns back that actual word. So it returns this temp word. So it's just the entire word form. We could do a version of this that returns the string name. We can return the ID, whatever we want. But returning the entire word, we can then split it and get whatever we need to from within the program that calls it. So let's look at the languages next. If I don't have that open, okay, let me go here. So I want to look at language next. Go into here. So this one, again, the top part's the same, but what we did is we moved in the load all languages to this bit here. And so this is just a method. It doesn't need any input. You just call it because it's going to load the file. You can get all the list of languages and it's going to return that list of languages. Or if the file doesn't exist, it's going to return a null value. So when you call in the program to check for this, you're going to have to account for the fact that maybe it will return null. It's just something to be aware of. I also moved in the dictionary that we had before. So we create the dictionary here. We can just call it here. We can create this now at any point in the program. We don't have to go to a specific form to get to it. And this, again, is the same concept as before. We take in the string as the key and the ID is what returns from there. I also put in the check for how you can see if a specific language is right to left or not. So it takes in the language name, basically, the language we're checking, and it goes through the list of all languages. It loads all the languages and then iterates through them and returns whether it's right to left when it reaches there. If it doesn't find a result, it returns false. This is one of those where right to left is going to be true if it goes right to left, like Arabic. But if it's left to right, it will be false. And so returning false indicates that the default is left to right. Finally, we can pull up the lexicon object. And when we look at this, what we've done is we got load lexicon in here. So now it's the same thing that we had before, but we can load the lexicon from any other place, just referencing lexicon.load lexicon and get that returning a list of lexicon items. The save lexicon function is exactly the same way. We just dump in the list of lexicon items, and then we iterate through it and we save it. And when it's done, we return true. So moving these in is really the easy part. Up next, though, we had to go through and change a lot of the code. So let's first look at form 1. After moving a lot of those variables out, you can see that we've only got a couple here at the top now that we're using within this. And because we're connecting over to like user, for example, and things like that, We needed this to still be static variables for that to function. I'm tempted to see if we can move some more of that into the user's object later, but I didn't want to refactor that much more than what I've already done without explaining it, because the more that I do, the more confusing it'll be to try to explain it all. But now when we're coming in, we've just got our create user method. This part is the same as what it was before. I didn't take any of this code out. And when the user is entered, we still have our temp stuff. I actually put a return in here for now, so it's not actually even doing any of this. If you want to, you can take this out and then see how it works. But for now, because we know that we're going to be replacing this code later, I just have it immediately return out of here and not do anything. User denied still does this message box. The temporary flashcard program, we will probably move this into its own class when we're getting ready to actually do the real flashcard bit of this. But here we go. When we come into form 1, this part is still basically the same. Now, I could update some of this and move it into the users as well. But I did change a couple of things in here. Like, for example, I added in if this is the cancel. So if you click the X on the box that pops up, instead of hitting one of the buttons, then it defaults to cancel. And what I decided to do is if they cancel it, we're just going to pop up the create user and prompt them with that. Other than that, this is basically the same as what we had before. So come down. This part is the same. And yeah, these are the same. It's just that we moved some of this out. So if you scroll through this and make sure your code matches up, you'll now see form 1 is the same. You can now make form 1 on your screen the same as mine. So feel free to use the pause button and look back over all of that as well. Now let's go to our Solution Explorer and let's just look at these one at a time. So when we go to add user, let's double click on submit to come in here. Now this, as far as I remember, I haven't changed anything in this. This was a relatively short one. So add user should still be exactly the same as what it was before. We can come up though and look at what create user should not exist anymore on here. So we can ignore that for now. We can go over to customize language, come in here, and if we hit F7, it will load the code. This actually looks like I didn't replace. I can show you how we do some of this. Now we're actually getting where all languages is something we can put in another method. We actually don't need any of this. So for now, I'm just going to comment out those. And I can also comment this out because we don't need that. And we can actually show all languages is going to be equal to language dot load all languages. So that's all we have to do to get all of these. So really, we just need to move this as well. We can take this, come up to here, update the list box. So we don't need any of this. And because of all the other code that we've got, this was only loading all languages. This is an example where we can refactor this out. So we don't need this anymore. I can just delete that and go like this. And we've got this saved now. We can actually save this. Let me see. I think we can move that into our languages though. Don't we have? Let me verify. I think we have created under languages. What do we need to save a language? We just have load language. We can actually move this to save language. So we can do a public static. It's going to need a list of language. Actually, it's going to return, sorry. We'll return a Boolean, and we will call this save all languages. We need to include a list of language. So that's what will come in. And it will end with return true. So we'll save this. So we can copy all of this. Just copy that out, come over to language, paste that in. And then the language that we're coming in, we're going to just use as all languages. So you can see, type things correctly. It's going to be all languages. That's what will come in. And you can see that just pasting it in like this, we've got all of this data that we needed to. So let's save that. We can come back to customize languages and we can comment this out. I actually want to include the comments up here. We'll save that. Now I know there's going to be an error, so let's see if we can find where the error is. Here we go. And it says, of course, save updated language no longer appears here, and that's because it's under language dot all languages. There we go. Let's save that. And what it needs to have put in is all languages. And so you can see that all languages is the thing that we're using here. So that's how I know that's what we're going to be importing on this. So we can now save this. Let's just test this really quick. Have it come up just to make sure that it's functioning as intended. So if we come in, select me as a user, come to language. I've deleted out everything for testing already. Let's add in Ukrainian, create language. It looks like it's fine on there. So we can delete selected. Yes, so that was working. I'll put it back in, Ukrainian, create, save and close. And now let's just make sure that if we try to come up to this, Ukrainian exists as a possibility. So, and you can see that this stuff is still working. As I said, I've taken out some of them, some of the words. I deleted it all just to make sure after we refactored that it's still functioning. So I was able to rebuild it. So having tested that, we know that this is no longer needed. So we will delete that out. So it looks like I forgot to grab this one. Let me just grab this whole thing, copy that, come back up to language. So we got this, get right to left. I think logically it fits right here. And of course it's going to be a public static boolean, check for duplicate. It's going to need a list of language, which will be all languages. That will come in. And then we're also going to need a string of language to check. And what we're going to do here is we'll replace this with language to check. We can remove that and we can, yes, we'll want that. So now, if language to check is this, so remember what we just changed on there, that was the text box. So when we call this, we need to come back over to customize languages. And the easiest way to find where this is, again, we just comment these out and we look for the error that comes out because of that. So we come over to here. And at this point, what we're going to need to do is this is going to be under language dot check for duplicate, right? Check for duplicate right there. Move that. And what it's going to need is all languages, and it's going to need the text box language name dot text dot to lower. Remember, we had that on there before, so we'll throw that in there. Let's see. I think we might need to add another parentheses on here. So there we go. And so if we run this again, come in, select user, come over, come to languages, and let's try to add English again. It's always already a language with that name, so it's not going to let us add it. So perfect. That is what we wanted to do. We now know that this is no longer needed, so we can delete that out completely. So that's how I've gone about refactoring this stuff, just taking that stuff and looking out. I'll scroll through this again so you can see what changes you might want to make on there yourself to make sure that it lines up with what you've got on your end. Again, feel free to pause and check everything else. So after customized languages, we already looked at the FCP there. We looked at form 1. We looked at language.cs, and we looked at lexicon.cs. So let's look at the manage lexicon. Come here, hit F7 to load this. And we've changed a lot in here. So in this one, we'll have to go over quite a bit of details here. So right now, one thing that I did is I changed for, I've added in this initialized language. So I took it out of here and I've changed the code on this one a lot. So there's no more error state on this. We don't have to worry about that. It's actually easier to search for it this way. So first we load in all languages. We do have to check if it's null. Like I said, if it doesn't find anything, it returns null. So we did make that check here. And so we're looking for if it is null or if the count is less than 2. And because of the way we're loading this now, we don't have to worry about if the count is less than or equal to 2. It's strictly less than 2. Then we just pop up this error here saying that there must be at least 2 to continue. I don't actually close the program at this point because you could, in theory, still use this with one language. If you don't have any, there's no language to select, so it's not going to even let you add anything. But if there's one language, you still might want to add like your English words and set them up, just not associating them with anything. So I figure it's worth at least having this. Here we have where we create the actual dictionary. Again, we call that language.createDictionary. So that step that we did before is now hidden in the class, and it's just easily assigned this way. So we do that. Then we update the combo box entries. That, I believe, is exactly the same as what it was. And we take all lexicon items and we load that through the lexicon now too. So this gives us the items that are in there already, the existing lexicons, so that we can loop through them later. So I believe this part is the same as what we had before, but again, you can check through and make sure that this lines up. When it comes to the list boxes, though, I know I did add in a check to make sure that the list of words that comes in isn't null. Once I deleted everything and tried it, if it is null, it was giving problems. So if it comes out null, I just immediately pass back the list that was given here. So if they're trying to pass in a list of words and there's nothing in that list of words, then we just immediately return from this. Otherwise, the rest of this code is the same as what it was before. Coming down in here, this has been updated where the language get left to right is now substituted in. It does the same functionality as what was there before, but it's now worded a little differently. So again, make sure you update this. This part, again, I believe is all the same. And when we get down to here, this is all the same as well, I believe. But searching in the lexicon word for the search box, so both this one and the target box, I also included this return if it's null. So if you're starting to type a word and there's not any words in the list, if you don't search and return on null, you will get an error on here. It tries to, once it tries to get to this point here and it's like, hey, wait, the list box doesn't have anything. There's no lexicon words. Actually, I think it was an error on this part, but regardless, one of these returns as saying, hey, this is null, we can't do anything. So it gets an error. So if you make sure that you exclude this if it's null on both this and this one down here, then that saves us from that problem. And it wouldn't have been a problem if you already had items in your saved files. So that's one of the reasons why you want to occasionally delete the data you're working with and rebuild it just to make sure that everything is functioning as you intend it to. But as we come back down here, I believe the linking is all the same. The only updates are where we changed like to the lexicon.save lexicon now. So this type of stuff has been updated, but the rest of the logic is all exactly the same as what it was. And that's true with all of the lexicon words and things like that too. So this should all now be the same. And let's come over to manage word. We come into this. And this again, this should be pretty much the same up top on here. I believe it was, nothing changed here, but we then have our all words coming in through this words.loadAllWords here, and we pass in the language value. Remember, this language ID value is set when we create this through this portion here. If it's not overwritten when the window is opened, then we're going to have to deal with it down here. And I added this little comment. Right now, there's no way to go into manage words unless you're going from the lexicon and adding or editing an item already there. But I plan at some point to include that option. So I've made a note here that we're going to need to handle all of this functionality once we do that. So that's something to bear in mind on here. This part is the same as what it was. But when we come down to the audio file now, this updates everything exactly how it was before. So the open dialog is all the same, but play audio is now just linked back to this FCP class where we put all the code that wasn't here into where it plays that in a single line. And again, we've got this because when we ultimately edit this, when we ultimately create flashcards, we want to be playing that from the file that we load the flashcard in as well. We want to play the audio automatically from there. So we updated where we generate the ID here, of course, for the current word ID. The rest of this should all be the same though, same logic for sure. And all of this, we just save all words at this point. We pass in all words in the language ID value when we do the save. So that part, the logic again is basically the same as what it was. It's just slightly updated. I don't know if I'm using, yeah, this is just the actual program behind the scenes that it's running. So when we actually run it, it does this initialization and stuff. So we don't need to worry about this. Select user. So we come in here, this just initializes and updates the list box as well. This is pretty much the same as what it was before. It does set the current user names, the current user username. That's still only on form 1. I didn't move that one over. We might want to move that over at some point, but that's still there. This is how we can delete stuff. I didn't really do much with this particular thing other than updating this. And again, the form 1 all users is still being referenced on this. So we didn't change this part from anything because I wanted it both on form 1 and this. I'm not sure I'm going to be using this elsewhere, but this is an area where once I sit down and think for a bit about how I'm going to be doing this, I might want to refactor this as well. But that should be largely unchanged. And I think that's it. So that covers the review of what we did and all of the refactoring. So in the next video, I will start to deploy the different ways that we're going to have flashcards presented. And just to give a quick overview of some of the ways, we're going to have the basic review where it shows the target language and the lexicon language is how I've been calling it here, but your known language is going to be hidden. And then you click the button to show it when you do it. And so this is like a normal review. You only see the one and then you show when you need to see the results. Then I'm going to have it where it plays the audio only. And you have to figure out what the word was just by the audio. Third time can be only visual, no audio, if you need to practice that. Then we're going to have where it shows the lexicon word that you're familiar with, and you have to remember what the target word is. So it's going to be the reverse. And those can also be displayed exactly the same way, where we do both of them. We have the English only, and then you have to put in the text and it plays the audio. Or we can have it where you have to type in the answer using the native language functionality. If you have to type, you'll need to use the system settings for that particular language, things like that. We'll also deal with that in the future of if you want to get around needing to install those from like Microsoft or whatever. So we'll discuss that moving forward, but that's kind of the plan for the next episode. Once that part's complete, we'll then need to figure out a way to measure how correct a user is and to keep track of how many times the item is presented, things of that nature. I'll want to get into showing a way to have a weight assigned to the random selections that we're doing so that if you fail a word, for example, it's more likely that you will pick it again sooner rather than later. And if you've successfully answered a word several times in a row, it's less likely to be selected. So we'll figure out the weights of those. And finally, we're going to have to link this to the user. So we're going to save the score that the user gets from going through these. We're going to link the decks that they decide to make of cards to the specific user. And we're going to be able to select between different users to have a different experience for each one. So that's the upcoming plans. And I hope to see you around soon.